So folks, I think we'll probably get started. It's right at 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Moore co-sponsored event. My name is Jamal Bydon. I'm the chair of the Moore board, which is called Movement for Race Equity in Omaha. Been around for years. Policy Research Innovation is our previous name. We're a nonprofit organization. Our goal is to deal with anti-racism and race equity issues in Omaha. And this event is being co-sponsored by Sacred Activism, racial, ethnic disparities community, inclusive community, and also the racial and ethnic disparities RED committee that works with juvenile justice issues. And other organizations. Nebraska Peace has been an organization that they'd like to co-sponsor. One of our goals is to have a number of these events where we have people come together to talk about issues of the day, as well as our elected and public officials. What we have tonight is this forum is basically engaged Senator Terrell McKinney talk about the experience of being a new state senator, what that's like for him representing District 11, and also sharing some of the issues that he and challenges he faced since being a new state senator. And also, this is what we hope would be one of many opportunities to bring him to the table to talk about some of those challenges he faced, as well as to get other people in our community to help do some of the heavy lifting. What we wanted to do, instead of having a lot of conversation, we want to use the chat box, because basically I'm going to ask him a series of questions for probably about 15 to 25 minutes or so, and then we want to open it up and have him respond directly to the participants today. One of our goals is to also increase racial diversity in the community of public policy officials, low-income families, and so on, but also deconstruct some of those issues that many families and individuals have not weighed in on that help affect our apartheid segregated communities in our state. We hope that this will help us develop a bit of social capital amongst each other, but more than anything, try to reverse some of the craziness that's been going on in this society. So again, we're happy that you can join us today. And I just want to give just a brief intro to Senator Terrell McKinney. And I've known him for a number of years. Mainly I've known him through Black Men United, which is a nonprofit that works with African-American men in North Omaha and elsewhere. He's a graduate of North High School. He was also at Murrayville University and Midland University. He has an MBA from there. And right now he's attending a Creighton University Law School, I know part-time as a law student. He has one child, and he's also on the board of Moore. So we're excited that he's doing that. A couple of years back, I know he was working at Nebraska Appleseed as a community advocate dealing with hunger issues. And I went to one of his forums that he hosted where he talked about the whole issue related to low-income families getting government assistance, as well as food from the government and so on, but very much involved in that. And he also, again, has been involved in the Democratic Party. And again, this was to my understanding, his first run for office, and has done very successful so far in bringing people to the table. So without much further ado, Senator Terrell McKinney, if you can probably start off and share a little bit more about yourself if you want to share. And then my first question is basically after you share is, what is it like being in Lincoln as a freshman state senator from District 11?
I think you pretty much covered everything. Born and raised in Omaha, grew up in North Omaha primarily, went to North High School. I wrestled. I coach wrestling now at North. Went to UNO for my first 3 years of college until they got rid of the wrestling team. Was an All-American wrestler there. And then that's when I went to Maryville. Came back home in like the fall of 2015 and pretty much just working a lot. And then in 16 is when I got involved with Black Men United, and that just morphed into today where now I'm a state senator. The first month and about a half, I guess it's about a month and a week or something. It's been crazy. It's different. I mean, we've been in committee hearings all day for the past few weeks because of COVID. They cut floor debate to later in the session. So some days it's a struggle to sit in a chair for about 10 hours and listen to people testify. But a lot of the hearings have been interesting. I'm on the education committee.
You were mute. Okay, go ahead.
The interesting bills, especially in judiciary, and it's been some interesting conversations with the police and landlords and individuals involved in the justice system and also in education. But I would say it's been fun. I can't wait to get on the floor and start floor debate. that's what I haven't experienced yet, but the committee hearings have been cool so far.
Yeah, I've been following some of your bills you've been introduced, and a few of your testimonials regarding police officers. Again, that's been an issue of our concern, particularly some of the racial profiling, just the lack of community engagement on racial issues on a decent level. Also, you talked about the county attorney bill that deals with prosecutory transparency act. You was jamming on that one. And so can you share a little bit more about that one, as well as your relationship and dealing with the police thing, why they refuse to support some of the things you're talking about? Two different bills.
Yeah, so I introduced two bills. One was the Municipal Police Oversight Act, and also another bill, dang, this is bad. LB 601 and LB 601 is the public database for police misconduct, and LB 515 is the Municipal Police Oversight Act. Both bills receive the typical response you get from law enforcement, where they don't think they need oversight and that the chief can take care of all the issues, and we're overstepping our boundaries in the legislature. The public database, their only real argument was that all misconduct cases shouldn't be on the database. They didn't have a strong argument against it. But for other bills, it's just been interesting. One thing I've noticed that, is annoying to me currently after sitting through so many hearings is all these cops and all these county attorneys, they crowd the judiciary committee, but and they always say, oh, we care about the kids in North Omaha and we're trying to do what's right, but you don't never see them crowding the revenue committee or the business and labor committee or the appropriations committee to help lift these same kids out of poverty. It's always, oh, we're trying to do the right thing for them. But if you're trying to do the right thing, it shouldn't be to lock them up. It should be to find resources so they're not living in poverty. They're not going through these situations, but they rather just lock them up like it's the solution. And it was a cop, somebody on the OPD gang unit last week. And I was just like, we've been tough on crime. We've been locking people up since I was a baby for over 30 years. Has that made the community safe? Has that made North Omaha safe? And if you look at the numbers, no. We have a huge prison overcrowding problem, and we still want to lock people up instead of finding alternatives and solutions to these problems. And that's what's so frustrating. It's like they just don't get it. And that's why we need bills for oversight and a public database for misconduct, because as much as we would think we're in 2021 and they get the issues, I don't honestly think they do.
Going back to the prosecutor or county attorney oversight, Connecticut has all their information on the webpage. So they keep track of racial ethnic disparity issues. So you can see if the county attorney is prosecuting more intensely people of color in Connecticut. And again, as part of their state law, they were one of the first states a few years ago to do that. But we don't have any database here. And that's one of the concerns of those of us who know that oftentimes disproportionate numbers exist because we got county attorneys who don't have any diversity in their office and things like that. And then, of course, the police department, you had a public safety auditor years ago who kind of helped keep them in check. And now there's no one to keep them in check with all the incidents that have happened in our community. So these are things we want the community to support and deal with. The other question I had for you, I'm surprised how Nebraska public and state funded institutions lack a certain amount of diversity. And one of the things I throw out is Nebraska Educational TV. Most people don't know this, but in the history of that television entity that's paid with public funds, there's only been one African American that I'm aware of on their commission or their board. And if you look at Nebraska Educational TV and Radio, there's there's an insignificant number of people of color who play a role. Statewide, we don't know what happens to people in Western Nebraska of color. I've been fighting for 40 years. I got letters that show that trying to get state senators and elsewhere to push diversity in public television and radio. And my question back to you is, how can we ensure or work on getting diversity in many of these public institutions that we have to pay taxes for, particularly when people of color make up 20% of the state population? Kind of a long-winded question, but I'm basically saying, how do we get diversity in public service entities where we have to pay tax to support them?
Honestly, it was something I was thinking about today because on the education committee, we've been going through governor appointments and things like that. And I was just sitting there like, all these people are white. All these commissions are like, they're filled with white people. Nothing against white people, but it lacks diversity. It like there isn't even a Latinx individual on these committees and commissions. And it's like, that's the problem, that the voices of a lot of individuals aren't being heard because access to those commissions is limited. Nobody knows that you could apply for these commissions. And my other thing is, I think there might have to be a bill. I was kind of brainstorming in my head today, like next year, I might introduce a bill that would require diversity on these boards, which probably should happen, because without it, it's always going to be an uphill battle. I know they'll say we can't find the candidates and all this stuff, but until we do something like that, I think we're always going to struggle, especially when it's up to the governor to appoint people.
Yeah, I serve on the Nebraska Children's Commission, and I know for the first 6 or 7 years they're in existence, there's like a 30-member board to deal with children issues, and obviously disproportion of those kids in child welfare and juvenile justice or children of color. And they did not appoint, the governor did not appoint anyone. And so finally they put me on there. I was surprised, but yeah, there's about 3 people of color on there, Native American, myself. No, there's 2. And then they have another advocate who's very strong about racial diversity, who's white. But for all intentional purposes, if we don't bring it up, they try to, put it back under the rug. The other question I had for you before we open it up is, what are your primary goals in your first session? I know I looked at a number of your bills. One deals with marijuana conviction. Obviously, we have a state where you can go to prison and jail and stuff for drug use. But yet, if you sell it over to Colorado, you get a lot of money. And then also you deal with some issues with the welfare reform. You deal with some other issues, law enforcement, Financial Literacy Act. I saw you involved in that one. Getting to the landlords. Malcolm X Day is another one. And also just to get us to have more employment practice to deal with people of color and so on. But what do you hope to accomplish during your first session here?
Oh, that's a good question. I love all the bills we introduced that you mentioned. There was some more I wanted to introduce, but I got talked down from some that I'm still going to introduce in the future.
Wait, hold on. When you say talk down, what does that mean? You get to do what you want to do, state senator.
I do, but workload wise, it
Okay, gotcha.
been the best decision to try all of them this year. But I guess my primary goal is to get stuff passed and be effective. I just don't want to be in the legislature just putting up a storm and not getting nothing done. I think it's important to, I think every bill I introduce should be passed. So I'm going to try to find any way possible to get those passed without compromising who I am and what those bills represent. So I understand for some of them, it'll be an uphill battle because we live in Nebraska, but I'm not one to think anything is impossible. I mean, a lot of people said I wouldn't get elected, so it is what it is. I'll figure it out, and that's my job.
Good, good. I ran through my questions a lot quicker than I thought. Do you have any comments or anything you want to share with the participants before we open it up? Because I can see we got some eager participants here. I'm looking at this smorgasbord of personalities. So yeah, any other comments you want to say before we open it up?
I guess our bill, the Marijuana Clean Slate Act, which is to decriminalize marijuana and provide the option and allow individuals with marijuana convictions to have those convictions and offenses off their record. The hearing for that is next. It's the 19th, February 19th. It's LB 480. Another bill, LB 479. It's an amendment to so you heard of the turnback tax, right?
Right.
And there's a committee that was created by Senator Ernie Chambers. And I had some discussions with him about that committee because it has Ben Gray, Chris Rogers, and I think another community member. And it might be Brenda Council. I'm not sure.
Back in the day, it was a state senator. It was the 3 of them who controlled that. And so one of the reasons why the money didn't go because the 3 had to agree unanimously on how they spend it. So it sat in there for a while. So I don't know if by virtue of your position, you're on that committee.
So the problem is, I talked to Ernie, he said I should have put myself on the committee, but he said at the time he thought that it would have been unconstitutional. But he said after he had got it passed and had some more conversations, it's not unconstitutional. So to create more transparency and figure out where the money is going, especially for kids in North Omaha in our community, I was like, I'm going to amend it and put myself and another community member on it, because I think it's important to have transparency and make sure the resources are going to where they're supposed to be. And yeah.
Good,
And the hearing for that is on the 19th as well.
good, good.
Yeah.
You know, I forgot to mention, I'm just sitting here looking at it. Reverend Cynthia, Dr. Cynthia Lindemeyer is kind of controlling the chat and so on. And I wonder if I'm going to do an audible, because initially we're going to just make it communicate via chat. And how many people, Cynthia, do we have on this event?
You've got 24.
Okay, so I'm wondering if we want to maybe, instead of go to the chat, go to the direct questions, comments, but what we want to do is we don't want people to be hogging the show and making long-winded speeches or things like that, but to ask a senator or make a comment or say something and kind of go from there. So we want to do an audible on this one, and who has the first question or comment or whatever? How can we do this? You mean to tell me everybody's gonna go quiet over me? This is unusual.
I'll ask a question.
Okay, good. Oh,
Hey, Terrell, I'm really pumped to see you in action down there. I've been watching you in some of the committee hearings and stuff, and your demeanor and your intelligent questions, the way that you approach the questions. I mean, you just lay out some really brutal stuff, but you do it in a really nice way. And I mean, you know, it's really fascinating to watch. The one question I had for you was, last year I remember watching Senator Lathrop. I mean, he just blew a gasket at the end of the year because he worked and worked and worked to pass.
I gotta get to the question, my friend. Give me
he worked to pass a bill that that was going to be supported by the county attorneys. They all agreed to it, and then it looked like the governor was going to veto it, and he just couldn't understand. So where are you at with your priority bills, and do you connect with the governor so that you don't, I mean, you can see that train coming, you got to figure out how to deal with it. How are you looking at dealing with that?
I haven't decided my priority bills yet. He didn't mention me in his state of the state, so I don't know where we stand. I met him once since I got elected. I don't know, we'll see. I mean, I have the hair discrimination bill that he vetoed last year, and we tried to address his concerns. So you never know with him. His office isn't the most transparent, so you never actually know where you stand. So I guess we'll see. And I mean, if he vetoes something, I must be trying to do something right. So well, it is what it is. But I've been trying to just advocate for my bills and talk to as many people as possible to try to get it across the finish line. But I don't know. We'll see.
Folks, you can raise your hand if you want to answer or raise a question or comment, so we can kind of track where we're at here. Someone made a comment. I look forward to the governor correcting his behavior by now and announcing you. Yeah, it's an interesting personality. You got to be kidding.
I didn't raise my hand. I will right now as I'm already talk, Jamal. So thank you, Senator McKinney, for having this evening, for being available. I wanted to ask a couple questions. There's a few of us on this call that work in substance abuse prevention. And a lot of times what we see is that the good intentions around decriminalizing substances also will increase access to it. And so, well, I think we're all on the same page about wanting to make sure people in Nebraska are not going to prison for being in possession of marijuana, the same way we wouldn't want them to be in prison for possession of probably, small amounts of other substances, possibly. What do we do with the people who are suffering from addiction or who might become addicted as a result of an increase in access? Good
question. Thank you.
I think we provide more access to services and assistance and resources. I think, a lot, like, for instance, the biggest mental health hospital right now in our state is the prisons, and that's a problem. we don't address mental health like we should. And I think we should also address addiction like we should as a state. I don't necessarily think that decriminalizing marijuana would increase, individuals being addicted to it, or if they even can get addicted to it. That's a complicated.
Senator McKinney, we'll have to talk more outside of this event then.
Right.
We'll have to tell you what we see with our clients. Unfortunately, it can be really, really sad.
Maggie, you said you had a second question. Did you have a second one? You had two? No? Okay, I see another hand up, another feedback. This is not school, so I'm not going to call on people, folks.
Hey, Senator McKinney, thanks for jumping on here with us. I know obviously the legislature addresses the entire state. You do have the ability to put in a bill that it would be that something could affect a metropolitan class city, which of course is only Omaha. So you can kind of target a bill a little bit in that way. With that being said, can you kind of talk to people and explain to them why it's so important that we put resources into communities first in the front end, instead of putting all of our resources like in Omaha into policing, which just addresses everything on the back end, and why that's so important to communities, like especially your community where you represent?
I think it's very important for a lot of reasons. I would say it's important to direct resources to the front end, because most people that I know that grow up poor, they don't wake up one day and say, I'm gonna go steal something, or I'm gonna go rob a bank, or I'm gonna do this stuff. It's compounded trauma, honestly, where, you see your mama struggling and she's crying and y'all don't got no food in the house. And you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? You go to apply for a job, you don't get hired. It's so much stuff that goes along with that we have to start addressing the root causes of the issues instead of trying to lock people up. It makes no sense to me that the state wants to build another prison when, one, they can't even staff the current prisons right now. We should be looking at ways to decrease the prison population and things like that. So it's so much importance to that. It lessens the need for police in the community. When you look at West Omaha, they have a lot more resources, so you don't see a lot of cops, and that's the reason, because they have resources. They can take care of themselves. They don't have to. It's so much stuff. I could go all day. Thanks, Riley.
Good. Other feedback, other questions? Yes, Carol.
Question, Senator McKinney, you're new to the legislature, and like most organizations, people can't get things done by themselves. So what are your strategies for finding and developing allies on the things that are important to you, and what are you willing to support that other senators are proposing?
Thank you. Good question.
My strategy has been just to be myself. I've talked to a lot of the other senators. It's kind of been difficult this year because of COVID, but I try to at least be cordial with everybody and just, if we disagree on something, I'll tell them up front, like, I don't agree with it. I don't play games. I don't lie and things like that. I try to be straightforward and just let them know where I stand. I understand there are some issues that we can come to compromises on, but it's some that I'm not moving on. But there's other bills, like, for instance, somebody introduces a bill, you could co-sponsor it or add your name to it, and that's a way of building, camaraderie and things like that. So there's different ways. It's kind of been difficult. From what I've been told, it's a different experience because of COVID, that you can't really converse and get to know each other like other years. But I've been trying to just be me and say hi at least and build from there.
There's a question I would raise here, and it just hit me as you said that. What is the best way to communicate with you? And then part of that is, have you gotten letters from your constituents or people? I'm remembering years ago, one of the state senators told me that he did not get a letter on a school finance issue, a bill from anyone inside the Omaha Public Schools. And he said, you'd be surprised the number of professionals and lay people who don't write letters or who don't communicate effectively. So one of my questions basically is, have you gotten letters from your constituents? Have you gotten letters from folks that says things related to legislative issues so far? And it's new, I know that.
I get calls.
More phone calls?
the most letters I've got has been from individuals inside the prisons.
Okay,
That's the most calls I get as well. I get my phone blow up, my office phone blows up all day from individuals in the prisons. And that's where all my letters been coming from as well. So it hasn't, but I'll take that back. I guess I would say like my Facebook inbox and things like that. I get a lot of emails and also get a lot of messages on Facebook asking me questions. So it's a combination of things.
okay, good. By the way, what's your name of your legislative aide? Is that the person I contacted? You have more than one or just him?
So I got an administrative aide, which is Michael Lee, and then my legislative aide is Dominique Johnson.
Okay, good, very good. Yeah, those are people you contact to catch up with you. Sometimes
Yep.
we can't catch up with you. Other feedback, other questions?
Hey, Jamal, you might want to check the chat.
Okay, it says, thanks, Senator McKinney, for being available tonight and answering those questions. I want to second what Maggie said earlier about marijuana. We see in other states, communities where marijuana is criminalized, it indeed increases access to substance, leading to more reach for those who have substance use disorder. And contrary to popular belief, there are a lot of people who are in treatment for marijuana use disorder, but decriminalization will not increase the resources needed for substance. We need treatment. Would you be open to tour facility in your legislative district so we can chat about substance use disorder and what impact marijuana has had on this population? So again, that was.
Yeah, I'm always open to discussing things about substance abuse. I got like my whole family has dealt with substance abuse my whole life. My grandparents, my cousins, and things like that. So I'm always open to finding more resources to conquer substance abuse and make sure individuals are getting the services. Me saying that it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. I just don't. I just probably see it from just my lived experience. I probably see it a little different, but I do think substance abuse is an issue in my community, and I'm always willing to, open my mind and take in new information as well.
Thank you. Joanne, you had a question? Joanne? Joanne
Yes.
and Mary both have a hand.
Good evening. I don't want you to see my face because I've had a rough day. But thank you, Senator McKinney, for being available. I had a couple questions, but now I want to prioritize a little better. Could you potentially share like why you felt the need to introduce the bill about Malcolm X Day specifically?
Number one, I think this state, this city, this country does him a disservice. And I feel like we need to do more to honor his legacy. He is a native Omahan, and I don't believe the resources have been provided to the Malcolm X Center like it should. I don't think you guys get enough attention. I don't think, we always hear negative things about Malcolm X my whole life. They always try to contrast him with Dr. King, and I don't like that. And I think it's important for us to really look at Malcolm and really rethink what we feel about him, because he was a great man and he stood for a lot of great things, and he's from here. And we honor everybody else. Columbus got a day, and we all know what Columbus did. So
Thank you. I just had a follow-up question to that. Let's say you get enough people in the legislature who want to support that. What do you think would be the next step as far as, okay, there's a Malcolm X Day. I don't know. I think the follow-up part is really what's hard for people to wrap their minds around maybe right now, aside from people who are closeted racists. That's a whole nother conversation, but what would you say on that?
I think if passed, I think the possibilities are endless. We got Juneteenth, we have a parade. Maybe we got a parade for Malcolm X Day. Maybe, more resources are a part of the bill is to make sure that schools are educating students on who Malcolm X is as well, making sure that is happening. I think the possibilities are endless. I think you could do a lot around a day to honor him. It's not just one or two things.
Good, thank
Gotcha.
you.
I didn't know about the education part. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Do you have any plans to propose any bill that will address, let me see, lack of resource failure to mental health and substance abuse treatment? Do you have anything related to that?
I don't have any bills this year, but that's definitely one of the top things on my agenda to try to get done while I'm in the legislature. So just because I didn't introduce a bill this year doesn't mean it's not high on my list to get done while I'm down there.
Someone asked, I think asked a question, the bill, the 480, which committee is that under?
That's in judiciary.
Okay, and then the other bill is 479. Which committee is that in?
That's revenue.
Check it out. Y'all like that. I almost had to call and say, we got that together. Thank you. Full disclosure. Okay, good. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Maggie.
So sorry, I'm a little biased because I am trying to help Nebraskans for Peace orchestrate a protest of building a new prison. But one of the things that I've been really amazed by is that in general, it's been something that hasn't been very opposed by conservatives, which I would think that because it's so expensive that, fiscal conservatives would be opposed to it, right? So I was just wondering if you, without having to say anyone's name, have you heard very much dialogue from conservative senators about why they would support this? Is it really just political, trying to play up to the governor, or I don't.
So a few weeks ago, we had a briefing with Frakes, with the Appropriations Committee and the Judiciary Committee, and he tried to sell us on the prison. And the biggest question is, it really doesn't make sense. And since then, the vibe I get is that the prison is not going to happen. I'm not going to say that's a guarantee, but that's the vibe I get is it makes no sense. We need to look at alternatives, but nothing is final yet, but I don't think it's going to happen. I'll do all I can to fight against it. So we'll see.
$230 million. And the other issue is that we look at all the craziness that's happened in the past 2 years. And even I found out that we pay our warden, the head guy, high top dollar more than some of the other wardens around the state. And so again, one of the concerns is also he's not really been to Omaha that often. He's been here about maybe twice or 3 times in a while. But again, I know there are people trying to bring him to Omaha more and talk with more community people and people who are into prevention. But yeah, that's one of the issues a lot of people working on. Mary, I see your hand is up. Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad somebody brought up the prison. I was going to ask you if you had any sense of how the other senators felt about the prison, and you have indicated that. I see a question in the chat. What can we do to help make sure the new prison doesn't happen? Danielle Conrad with ACLU was speaking to a group called Coalition for Nebraska. And she said she thought that defeating the prison was very doable. So, maybe other people feel like I do. I'd be happy to pay more taxes to do programming in prisons so that when people go out, they can help themselves. But I am not giving money for a building that does nothing to solve the problem. So anyway, I just encourage you to we'll keep looking around and seeing what to do to oppose the prison. Thank you.
Someone raised the point, what can we do more? Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, somebody asked the question, what can we do to kind of help fight against it? I would say email everybody on the Appropriations Committee, email everyone on the Judiciary Committee, and also email all the senators as much as you want and let them know that you oppose the prison. That's probably the best way possible. You can email the governor, Frakes, call them, just do all you can. Send letters.
Bree, you have a question.
And also please come to the prison protest on February 21st at the Capitol. We're Nebraskans for Peace, ACLU of Nebraska, Indivisible Nebraska, Stand In for Nebraska. We're all partnering to get the word across to everyone in Nebraska that this is not something we want to spend money on. And I believe Senator McKinney has even been asked to speak at that too. So we'll just see how that goes.
Bree, I see your hand is up, Bree.
Yes, since we're talking about spending money on things in mental health and substance abuse, one of the biggest frustrations for people that work in child welfare or in substance abuse mental health is that the budget was cut by $5 million within the last 5 years for that funding. So is there a way that you're or maybe working with some of your counterparts to look at the funding so that the accessibility will be more viable?
Yes, There is a way. I know some other senators are looking directly at it to try to address that issue. I can't say what exactly, but I know it's an issue that is definitely being tackled down in the legislature.
Yeah. Okay. You know, I was going to raise a question, and it's not part of it's in the news lately. Is the St. Francis Child Welfare, and apparently the governor is basically going to give them some more money, like 100 million or some crazy amount. Have you heard any information about that kind of a free gift to an organization that literally underbid, and all of a sudden now we got to find money to bail them out because they have a level of, I want to call it incompetence, and when they wanted to bid through that whole process? Have you heard anything on St. Francis, some of the challenges we've seen in the paper?
That is a mess, and that's probably an understatement. I know some like it's just multiple people trying to find ways to fight against it. It's definitely a mess. I don't see how they received the contract again after what they did, and it's really just the governor and his administration doing what they want. And we're trying to. There's people trying to find ways to, you know, fight against this contract. It's difficult, but I don't know. It's a crazy situation.
Someone read in, how do we enforce the state laws on child welfare? Raise that. How do we do that, or can we? Because apparently there are a number of issues that are happening behind the scenes. We don't always see it in the media. Do we have a child welfare advocate, Jennifer Carter, who's the ombuds person, or like the inspector general? We have somebody for the prison. Then of course we have Julie Rogers. I know they're supposed to be up on their game, dealing with some of these issues affecting families and issues. Have you had contact with any of them, the three folks who are employed by the unicameral in the state to do stuff like this?
Can you restate your question? Because
In other words, have you? Julie Rogers is the inspector. She deals with some of the issues related to child welfare. Not Jennifer Carter, rather. Julie Rogers was there previously. She's now the ombudsman person. And then you have a guy named Doug Kuppenpecker, I think, who is deals with the prison and so on. These are folks who are kind of providing some of the oversights. I mean, that question was asked, how can we enforce the state laws on child welfare? And maybe I'm someone who deals with, you know, children issues might be able to help on that also, but I'm not sure. And have you contacted, or have they contacted you, any of these individuals?
I haven't talked to nobody directly about any child welfare stuff. I know some stuff has came across the Judiciary Committee because there's been a lot of bills pertaining to juvenile justice. So we've had conversations during committee hearings about child welfare and juvenile justice.
Okay, there's another question. Do you have any plans to try to eliminate mandatory minimum sentences?
Yep, it's on my list of things to do.
Wait, I got a brief answer. It was on my list of something to do.
I kind of have my hand up since we're on the child welfare issue. One of the things that's really concerning is there is a disproportionate amount of caseworkers that look like the children that they're servicing. I know you proposed a bill for the Natural Hair Act, but have you thought about proposing some type of case management bill that requires a certain portion of the case managers to reflect the population they're servicing?
Yes, I've definitely thought about that, and I'll probably introduce something like that. And it's not just case managers, probation officers. It's so many people that have direct effect to the outcomes of kids in our communities, and none of them, majority of them, never look like those kids. And the same way with those commissions I was talking about earlier that are predominantly white. I think something needs to be done. So I might have to introduce some legislation to address it, but that's something I've been thinking about even before I even got in the legislature.
Paul, you have your hand up? Paul?
Yeah, well, the prison thing is, yeah, it's a no-go, but the problem is you get all these phone calls from these guys inside. The conditions that they've been living with are ridiculous. And the problem is if you don't create better facilities somehow, and they don't change the laws that you guys are trying to change that keep sending guys to prison, or change the conditions that fuel the birth to prison pipeline, what's going to change? What are you going to do to help the conditions in the prisons if they don't do some new construction or something? How can you go upstream? What are you trying to do there?
I think we have to find ways to decrease the population. We have to look at sentencing reform, mandatory minimums, why individuals are going to slow down the incarceration rate, do some things on the front end. It's a multi-pronged thing. I don't think there's one solution to it, but I'll just say it. I'll never advocate for building another prison in this country. It just never will come from me, because I'm just against prisons, period. So I'm always for finding a better solution. You look at other countries and other states, there are other states in this country that are decreasing their prison population without building another prison. There's a lot of examples globally that shows there's better ways to house individuals and have better outcomes. I think we got to look at stuff like that. I'll just never think about building a prison. I think it's always a better solution.
Good. I say another question or comment here. What can we do collectively, particularly your constituents, support some of the works and bills that you're working on? How can we do better to build that kind of a village approach to making things happen and help activists to do what we need to do?
I would say if you feel safe, you could come down and testify. That's still an option. You could submit a position letter or a written statement. There's a new thing this year, which is an online comment. You can submit comments. All the committee members will be able to see those as well. And call when a bill gets on the floor, reach out to the other senators in the legislature to let them know that it needs to get passed. I think those are probably the best ways to help advocate for the bills I introduced.
There's a question that's out there, and I know we've had some feedback that you testify differently. You have to come there early in the morning if you want to make it officially for the record. So my question somewhat is, how is it different now versus in the past? In terms of if you want to make contact and get it in the record versus, because you said people can come down there, and I'm like, I hear there's some misunderstanding in that whole process.
No, you still can in-person testify, but then there's an option to drop off a letter or position letter in person. If you don't want to sit in the committee room, you could drop off a letter and it'll be written into the record as well. But I don't know if you want to drive down to Lincoln just to drop off a letter and go back home.
So
I can answer some of that just specifically. You have to be there between 8:30 and 9:30, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
To deliver the letter in person, it has to be, and it has to go to the committee room. So it's different than it was before. And then in terms of testifying in person, there's only 30 minutes pro and 30 minutes con and 30 minutes neutral.
That's only in judiciary. There's other committees that don't have those limits.
It's
because
that's really
judiciary has so many bills that if we had it open, we'd probably be there. We're already there late. It'd just be a lot longer.
Okay, so there's only it's only judiciary. Okay, that's great to know. Thank you.
From what I know, I haven't heard it in any other committee outside of judiciary.
Okay, good. We have about 15 minutes left or so. I want to give people who had a chance to say anything. If there are any comments or things you want to ask the state senator. Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, I see your hands up. Yes.
Thank you. I had a question. So there's like 648 bills introduced, and I was wondering if you had any advice on like how to stay up to date with maybe the bills that you introduced, because time is limited sometimes, just to know, like, I think knowing when the day is, because I know there's time frames too.
So there's sorry to cut you off, but there's a bill tracker system. If I'll put the link into the box, but if you know the bill number, you could track bills, and that's helpful. And it'll give you email alerts of what's going on with those bills. Probably the best option, but sorry for cutting you off.
Did you have some more to that question? Any other comments? Anything else you want to say?
I guess my other question, so my background is in public health, and I know like living in our district, there's a lot of structural barriers to public health, and maybe this is more life advice. So we have like high radon, high lead, food deserts. How do you get someone that doesn't have that lived experience to care about something that may not impact them?
Something I learned just organizing in the community, you got to try to make it as real as possible. And sometimes they might not listen to you, but if you know somebody with that lived experience, expose those individuals to those individuals. That's why it's good to have testimony or written position letters from people that actually are living the issues. Because a lot of the times, the issues for some people are just for campaigning or just for political gain. But for me, for instance, a lot of the issues that I talk about is things I deal with on a daily with my family. So I guess it's different person to person, but I think if you make it practical and make it as real as possible, it's a lot easier for things to be understood. But even doing that, is some people that you may or may not connect with.
Maggie, I see your hand is up, Maggie. Or did you have your hand up?
I did a while ago, and then I tried to take it down because I talked too much, and then I put it up on accident. So I'm sorry.
Okay, good. I see some other nonverbals out there. Someone else who hasn't said a word. You know, we try to show the love by getting everybody to participate if possible.
I just want to mention that if you go to the home screen of the Nebraska legislature, like the third line down, it says due to COVID-19, the legislature has expanded procedures, the public input on legislation, and you click on the next sentence and you'll get all the ways that you can interact with them and all how to comply so that your voice can be heard.
The other thing that jumped out is Senator Vargas had a bill that deals with racial impact statements. In other words, there are a lot of bills that are introduced, and he wanted to find out what are the impact on diversity. And I know it didn't go anywhere, and he reintroduced it. Is there any chance that may go somewhere? And then part of the follow-up for me is, how do you know which bills to focus on? It was just mentioned we have 600 of them. And how do you know it's not worth your time or is going to go anywhere? How would you know? Will you give us insight to some of those bills that may move versus whatever? So the racial thing is one question, and then you know what to waste your time on this.
So the racial impact statements. I know Senator Vargas tried to get that in the rules, and it wasn't really going anywhere. So he went another route. I'm not sure where that bill is going right now because I don't even know what committee it's in currently. I'll have to double check. But I think it's a great idea because, for instance, there was a bill last Friday in judiciary to allow police to hold juveniles for 24 hours or something like that. And what was left out of the conversation, which I had to bring up, was the racial impact of a bill like that. And I think a lot of times that's not thought about when senators create bills. So if anything, it opens their eyes to if this bill is passed, this will negatively affect this population. It doesn't have to be the Black community. It could be the white community. It could be any community. But if you don't know how a bill is going to impact certain populations of the community, how can you always say that it's good or bad? And I think, something like that would be great, but I'll have to double check to see where it's going. And on the topic of 648 bills, I would say it's hard to track all of them, but if you're passionate about something, and that's where you start. I'll probably say, me, for instance, go look at my bills and find a couple bills that you like, put them on the bill tracker and track them that way. It's difficult because there's so many bills to tell you what's the correct way to track bills. Follow organizations like MORE and ACLU and other nonprofits in the community that do a lot of advocacy. It's no real solution to it, but I would just say if you're passionate about something, reach out to your senator to see what they're working on. But I try to be as transparent as possible and post when our bills are coming up and things like that to try to be helpful, but it's hard.
One other question jumps out at me. I actually written a couple of letters already, and the question is, are there some people who write a lot more letters or contact you more than other people? In other words, are there top 10 people already? You just started, but have you noticed anything like that yet? Years ago, a state senator said there were one person in his district who was on his case every day about something, but I'm asking, are you have people like that so far?
Probably the top people that call me consistently and reach out to me or send me letters have been individuals in the prisons, honestly.
Prisons, okay.
Those are the people I get calls from the most from Tecumseh and NSP. So I would say our community members in the prisons are who I probably talk to the most.
Wow. Well, I know we got some draconian prison systems. We got one of the worst prison system in the country. And also I've heard people who work there as guards, some of the horrific things that they go through, the psychological things. It is not a place that you really want to go. And again, we tend to throw people in these dungeons and holes and solitary confinement and so on. And again, these are things we need to address as a state of being somewhat humane when people commit a crime. And the other point is, I remember when I was a member of Friends and Family of Inmates, there was a state trooper or a law enforcement guy who got caught dealing with some child abuse situation or sexual abuse with some kid. And when he got to prison, one of the inmates just busted his head open, and there was really no repercussions. And we talked about it. And my concern was, again, if you go to prison is one thing, but it's another thing when the prison official let other people beat you up or torture you, and they look the other way. Again, people sometimes will have no mercy on certain people, but again, it's almost like double jeopardy. If you're gonna go to prison, that's your fine or whatever you got to deal with for that crime. But you shouldn't have people that get tortured and psychologically abused, and that happens in Nebraska prisons, whether you acknowledge it or not. But yeah, I learned that from being a part of these anti-prison groups way back in the day when I was at Catholic Charities. Other questions, other feedback, folks who have not said anything. I know we got a couple of folks from out of town on this group here.
I see Karen wrote a question. Do I have any bill topics I would like to explore in the interim? Yes, a lot of the bills that I didn't introduce this year, one that I want to look at is figuring out what is affordable housing and really defining it. The bill I had, which wasn't completely flushed out, which is why I didn't introduce it, it would define affordable housing to about 30% of the income level of a certain legislative district, and just trying to figure out what is affordable housing and what is not affordable housing. Because we had a conversation with the landlords last week, and they were talking about there's affordable housing, but I was like, if you live in District 11, whose median income is a little over $26,000, that's not affordable housing. So that some probation reform stuff, like some probation reforms, some other ways to decrease the prison population. Another big thing for me is economics. I think a lot of this social stuff can happen eventually, but the one thing that I think definitely needs to be addressed and something I want to prioritize is making sure that the economic landscape in North Omaha changes while I'm in the legislature. I don't want to get all these social programs and these social bills passed and people are still poor and not lifted out of poverty. So that's one thing I'm going to try to focus on.
Good. There's another question. Can TIF be tied to affordable housing and minority business?
TIF is difficult. The way it's written and a lot of the language in the statute makes it difficult for minority groups to access TIF, honestly. Yes, you could try to tie it to affordable housing. It's just, which is why we need to define what is affordable housing, because right now, somebody could build a new development and say we got a market rate affordable housing and 90% of the population can't afford it, but their argument is it's affordable. Affordable to who is the problem?
Good. There's a question here. Are there other forums like this that we have planned with state senators? I'm not sure if that's directed to more or the co-sponsors or you. What is your game plan on continuing these kind of events?
For me, once I get a little more settled in, I want to start doing town halls, which will probably be online for the time being until we get through with this pandemic, because I don't want to gather people anywhere. So I'm going to start, because I was doing people power hours during my campaign, which was weekly. So I'm going to try to start doing some town halls coming up once I get through with all this committee hearings and stuff like that. But be on the lookout for that. So there'll be ways to engage with me. I won't just be silent.
By the way, Senator Justin Wayne's going to do something with the Notre Dame sister. I'm thinking it's the 18th of, is it of February that they're doing that? And so they're going to have an opportunity to talk about race issues and some of the issues that he's been dealing with. So there's an opportunity to do that. And obviously it's February the 18th at 7 p.m. And again, you can sign up. I think it's going to be kind of a Zoom thing like this. So that's an opportunity. And then of course, one of the things we're trying to do is encourage more and more people to do this and bring people to the table to talk about respective issues and so on. So I do have one last question. Okay, Maggie, I see you. You got one last question?
One last question.
Okay, notice she said the last question. I like when she said that. Go ahead.
Promise. It has to do with COVID and vaccinations. And of course, for very understandable reasons, we've seen people of color be very hesitant to, more hesitant to want to get vaccinated. And it's not like it is, and I am totally stereotyping here with some of the, QAnon people who think that it's going to be a tracking device or that the virus isn't real. It's some legitimate concerns about the health outcomes for them if they get vaccinated. Is there anything that you feel you can do as a leader to encourage people that look like you to, to get that vaccine, or is it something you're hesitant about as well?
I think it's something that we got to provide people with the best information possible and let them make the decision on their own. I'm not gonna tell people to take it or not take it. I think it's a decision that you got to make on your own. Because of the historical nature of it, when I've talked to a lot of people in my community, they kind of get defensive once you start saying you should take it. So I just think we have to provide as much information as possible and be as transparent as possible and make sure that the whole process is transparent, because any negative causes those individuals to say, no, I'm not taking it. So I think we got to make sure we do more to communicate and be transparent with people and then let them make that decision on their own. I won't tell nobody to take it and not take it. I'll just say, make an educated choice on your own and go from there.
Good. We got time for one more question. I say here, how do we enforce protection for individuals in prison, particularly if the way that that limits solitary confinement? I do know that the administration has done that excessively in our state. So how do we protect them and stop some of the solitary confinement stuff?
I would say, that takes me and other senators getting on the Department of Corrections and making sure that their policies are just and making sure that they're not, overly confining individuals for extended periods of time, and also find ways in legislation to restrict as much solitary confinement as possible. I don't think it's humane. I know people that have been in solitary confinement and they don't have the best stories. Paul, on your question, what do prisoners call about the most? I would say treatment, primarily mistreatment from the correction system and guards and things like that, and them feeling uncomfortable in the prisons currently because of the virus, and not necessarily afraid of the inmates, but or the individuals they're with them, but more so the staff that's coming in and out that are bringing the virus back and forth. That's their biggest issue, is their safety and their treatment. Good.
Folks, we're down to the last couple of minutes. I want to make a couple of announcements, then also let Reverend Cynthia Lindemeyer, Dr. Lindemeyer, say a couple of statements. We're going to have an event March the 17th. It's called How Tax Increment Finance is a Racial Issue. We're going to have Jack Dunn, who's a member of our board, as well as Brian Smith, who's been very much involved about what's happening at the Crossroads Mall. And he's had a number of Facebook posts out there saying that the city is just giving away money to certain folks, which takes away from needed services in our urban areas. And TIF has been one of those questionable and controversial issues. So we're going to talk about that, give you a chance to participate in that conversation, February the 17th. So if you get a chance to participate, we'd enjoy your focus on that one. So that's one. And then the other event we have planned is, I think, February the 25th, which is a Thursday, which is an open forum. I've had a number of nonprofit organizations, I would say the Foster Care Review Office and so on, who really don't have a way of contacting and engaging the communities of color and low-income communities, because they have not done a great job in some of these areas, so they want to reach out more. And what we've decided is more to do is to basically host from time to time listening sessions, as well as opportunities to do events like this and build a constituency as well as a population who can engage not only public officials, but people who are in administrative positions to make a difference. And again, build community. So we're going to be doing that. And then hopefully in the upcoming months, you'll see more and more organizations utilize different formats to communicate some of their issues out there. So I'm going to stop right there. And Reverend Cynthia Martin, do you have something you want to share about sacred activism and some of the events you're working on?
Oh, hi. Yes, we have. So on January 6th, we'll have, or January 6th, on March 10th, we'll have this follow-up discussion from our November book study on caste about what happened on January 6th. And this is really meant to just be a time to discuss what people haven't had a chance to discuss. And Jamal is going to help moderate that event. And I know many here are from the faith community, and I just challenge folks to think about one's faith vis-a-vis action, especially when it comes to legislation and to acts of injustice that we see in the law. So our sacred activism community is growing and have many events happening that you can find us on Facebook. And I just want to say thank you to State Senator Terrell McKinney. I have the utmost respect for you, and I'm so thankful that you are the state senator. And I'm going to be able to say I knew him way back when as you continue on. So thank you for what you do.
Good. And I also want to say thank you, Senator McKinney, for being a part of this, as well as being open and helping us do a lot more of this. The other thing I want to throw out, and I think is very important, folks, I was traumatized by January the 6th. I thought we'd come a lot farther. And I think we got to do some serious work in Nebraska, because we got a lot of Trumpites and people who are mean-spirited. And we see that. And so I think that we're going to have to notch up our game plan to help educate people and push back not only in our educational systems, but even in our circles, because there are a lot of people who support that mentality and who have not seen the way that we've had a double system in how people were treated when they committed a crime in DC versus they committed crime in our local and national agendas. So there are some great conversations we can have. And I think at the end of the day, folks, we got to be stand up and be counted. And so our goal is to have an opportunity for people to say things, but even those of us who are facilitators to hear what other people have to say so that we can grow. But I really appreciate you participating tonight. And of course, we will continue these events because I think more our mission is to deal with anti-racism and race equity. And I will say emphatically, there are very few organizations that actually push the envelopes in our state and in our community on that. So this is a niche we think we can help bring our worlds together. So thank you very much. And we hope you've enjoyed this. And if you have other comments or feedback, or want to contact the senator, obviously our doors are all open. And of course, he indicated, Senator McKinney, that he's open to feedback and so on. One last quick question is, when people draft bills, do you draft them yourself as a state senator, or are there professional drafters who help you in that kind of area? I don't know anything about who drafts bills.
There's bill drafters. We come up with the ideas and we kind of tell them what we want in a bill. And then the bill drafters come up with the draft, and then we review it to try to make sure it's what we thought. And you go back and forth with bill drafters, but there are professional individuals in the legislature that help out with drafting bills.
Good, thank you. Did not know that, but that was on my question list. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And folks, I hope you have the rest of a good night. Barocco.
All right, thank you everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.